Hi there, this is Machine Pun Kelly, aka MPK, and today I want to talk to you more about how Donald Trump's policies will destroy the American economy. Specifically today, I want to discuss mass deportations. This is going to get hard to hear, but I'm asking you to stick with it and get all the way to the end. The next thing we want to talk about is mass deportations. Undocumented workers contribute as much as $2.2 trillion to the American economy, about 8% of our total GDP. As such, as bad as the effect Trump's tariffs will have on the economy, mass deportations will have a far more devastating impact. They could cause a GDP hit of 4.2 to 7.4% by 2028. By comparison, the Great Recession was a 4.6% hit, and that was the worst recession since the Great Depression. So let's examine why mass deportations could make this the worst recession since the Great Depression. Undocumented migrants actually have a huge impact on consumption, not just because they buy things, but also because they produce things. They account for 27 to 45% of agriculture workers, 13 to 25% of construction workers, and 7 to 18% of hospitality workers. Taking them out of the workforce because they are either being deported or staying home because they're afraid of being deported would mean a massive reduction in things like produce, construction, hotels, and restaurants. To explain, this is Dale. Dale runs a strawberry farm in California. About 40% of his workers are undocumented, which is about average. He also has a 20% profit margin, which is also average. If you remove the undocumented workers from his farm, you don't reduce 40% of his profit, you reduce 40% of his harvest, which means Dale is now losing money on his strawberry farm. So Dale goes bankrupt, and the farm stops doing business. That means no more strawberries come from Dale's farm, and it means the 60% of his legal workers also no longer have jobs. Now do the same thing with thousands of farms, small construction companies, hotels, and restaurants. But that's not all. This is Mark. Mark is a truck driver. Mark used to deliver strawberries, but now he doesn't have a job either because all the strawberry farms went under. For every 500,000 migrants deported, there are another 44,000 citizens who lose their jobs because they are in support fields. Estimates are that mass deportations will raise unemployment from 4 to as high as 8%. Mass deportations will also have a massive impact on food prices. And it's not just strawberries. In fact, the price of everything in this value meal you're looking at, the burger, the bun, the lettuce, the tomatoes, the fries, the Coke, and even the ketchup, is going to go up. Let's explore. We'll start with the fruits and berries. Strawberries, blueberries, blackberries, apples, cherries, oranges, lemons, and limes are just some of the hand-picked fruits and berries that can't be automated. Depending on the product, anywhere from 50 to 90% of workers are undocumented. Mass removals could raise the price of these by as much as 90%. Vegetables, such as lettuce, celery, asparagus, tomatoes, and sweet corn, are labor-intensive, with undocumented workers comprising about 28% of the harvesters. Mass deportations would raise the price on these by 10 to 15%. Nuts, including peanuts, almonds, and walnuts, will be heavily impacted. About 70% of field workers are undocumented workers. Production could be reduced by 20 to 30%, raising prices by 15 to 20%. Specialty crops such as artichokes, figs, olives, pomegranates, and raisins will also be impacted. Over 70% of their workers are undocumented, and mass deportations could raise the price of these by 15 to 25%. Dairy products, including milk, cheese, butter, and ice cream, could see a 20 to 30% spike in prices, as undocumented migrants account for 50 to 90% of workers. Mass deportations could impact 80% of the supply. Meat, including beef, pork, and poultry, will go up. Undocumented workers comprise approximately 45.5% of the meatpacking and processing workforce, with over 225,000 undocumented immigrants employed in agricultural-related fields, including slaughterhouses and packing plants. Mass deportations could cut labor by 10 to 15%, resulting in a 15 to 25% price increase. And it's not just fresh foods that will see prices go up either. 62.8% of processed food workers are undocumented. This means things like bread, pasta, sausage, fish sticks, canned tuna, cookies, crackers, tortillas, canned and frozen vegetables, frozen French fries, sodas, condiments like ketchup, mustard, and barbecue sauce, and so on, could all see price increases from 5 to 25%. Again, the poorer you are, the harder this will affect you, as lower income households spend 30% of their income on food already. And it's not just food that will be impacted. Mass deportations would increase construction costs by 10 to 25% for several reasons. First, the 20 to 25% labor shortages would mean higher wages of between $2 and $5 an hour and project delays. Second, material costs would go up by 9 to 15%. 42% of lumber workers are undocumented. Removals would cost the price of that to go up by 10 to 15%. 20 to 30% of concrete production workers are undocumented. Removals would cost the price of that to go up by 10 to 15%. Mass deportations would cause a 20 to 25% labor reduction in steel production and fabrication. The cost of steel rebar would go up 9 to 15%. 25 to 30% of drywall production workers are foreign-born, many undocumented. A 20 to 25% labor shortage would reduce gypsum output, tightening drywall supply, raising the cost of drywall by 10 to 15%. And all of that means residential projects could rise by $15,000 to $40,000 per home, commercial projects by 15 to 25%, and infrastructure by 10 to 20%. The hospitality industry would also see inflation. The hospitality industry includes hotels, restaurants, bars, and tourism-related businesses. Undocumented workers make up a substantial portion of the workers in this section, and their removal would lead to labor shortages, reduced service capacity, higher operating costs, and increased prices for consumers. According to the American Immigration Council, undocumented workers make up 31% of the hotel maids and housekeepers, 26% of restaurant cooks, 22% of waitstaff, and 20% of dishwashers. Mass deportations would mean a 10 to 15% increase in menu prices, a 5 to 10% spike in hotel costs, and a 10 to 15% spike in drink costs. The reduction in labor would also mean that tourist spots would have to reduce hours or services, reducing visitor numbers by 5 to 10%. Mass deportations would also have a significant inflationary impact on the auto industry, the healthcare industry, the support roles, the retail industry, transportation, warehousing, clearing and maintenance services, childcare, and educational support. An important thing to recognize with all the fields we've discussed in this section is that these jobs are all where there are already staffing shortages. Filling these jobs is not automatic. In fact, there are 2 million more undocumented workers in America right now than there are jobless Americans. And not every jobless American is able or willing to go pick strawberries or wash dishes. You might argue that the migrants should just wait in line like everybody else. But that has one big problem. There is no line. Permanent visas just aren't issued for low-wage workers. There are two kinds of temporary visas. H-2A, which are for agriculture workers, and H-2B, which are for everybody else. Technically, migrants don't even apply for these visas. Employers apply for certificates, and each has their own challenges. For H-2A visas, there is about a 3 to 5 month process from the time a farmer starts the process to when a migrant can start working. That means a farmer can miss an entire harvest waiting for that to happen. And to explain this, let's bring back Dale, the owner of our favorite strawberry farm. Dale hires 10 undocumented workers for the season, paying them $10 to $12 per hour. He spends about $129,000 per 6 months on labor. He has $250,000 in gross revenue and $20,000 in net profit after other expenses, such as fertilizer, water, and seeding, and so on. If he were to get H-2A visas for them, it would mean he'd have to pay $1,500 to $3,000 in administrative fees, transportation fees, workers' compensation, and provide meals and housing. 10 workers would cost him $250,000, his entire revenue. Furthermore, the strawberries have a short growing season, so he could pay the cost of getting those H-2A visas and bringing everybody there, only to have his workers show up too late to harvest the strawberry, thus costing him the entire season of production. Larger farmers can mitigate these costs by doing things like having dormitories for workers to live in that spread out the cost per worker. So larger farms can be viable where smaller farms cannot. That means mass deportations would end up with large corporate farms absorbing small privately owned farms. That's why there are 5 undocumented workers for every H-2A visa issue. As far as H-2B visas, they are capped at 66,000, and there are currently around 7 million undocumented workers who are working non-agriculture jobs. We are only about 6.94 million visas short. That's just not realistic. Some would argue that undocumented workers can be replaced with automation, but that has issues too. First, most of the produce undocumented workers harvest can't be replaced with automation. Things like berries, tomatoes, and lettuce are too sensitive to be automized. So what is the solution? A way for those who are here to work legally. In fact, rather than subtracting $1.7 trillion from the economy over 10 years, legalizing them would add $1.7 trillion over 10 years. It would mean wage increases, new jobs, stabilizing crops, and they would be paying more in taxes and spending more money. There's one more thing we need to discuss here, and to help explain that, this is Sally. Sally, who lives in Miami, supplements her retirement income by renting out a second home when she's still paying a mortgage on. She bought the house in 2020 for $300,000 with a $60,000 down payment and a 3.0% interest rate with variable rate financing. After her mortgage, insurance, property taxes, and maintenance, she is paying $1,560 per month and renting the property for $2,300. So she is making just shy of $800 a month on the rental. But the house is in an area where 30% of the residents are undocumented, and in 2025, the mass deportations start to happen. While she was renting out the home to legal residents, her renters moved out to a cheaper rental because prices were going down. So she finds a new renter, but since rental prices have dropped 20% due to all the vacancies, they are now only paying her $1,840. Furthermore, because of inflation, instead of paying 3% interest, now she's paying 9.5% interest, and her new mortgage is $1,877. After adding on the other costs, she is losing over $800 instead of making almost $800. Unable to keep up with the payments, the mortgage defaults, she loses the house, and her good credit rating is ruined. Mass deportations ruined her retirement plans, and now she has to go back to work at 75 years old. She wasn't undocumented. She didn't rent to anyone undocumented. She even voted for Trump. But her retirement plans were destroyed by mass deportations. This scenario is not unrealistic. Estimates are that between 1.5 million and 3 million homes could go into default. While this isn't the same scale as in the Great Recession, it would be largely localized to cities like Los Angeles, Houston, and Miami, where 30% of the renters are undocumented. When you put it all together, mass deportations could result in a 7.4% contraction to the GDP, a 6.7 and 9% unemployment rate, and up to 9.1% inflation. And oh yeah, the cost of eggs could go up 13.6%. Once again, I'm Machine Pun Kelly, aka MPK, and thanks for watching. If you liked what you saw, don't forget to click like and subscribe. And if you want to keep up with all the videos in this series, check out my It's the Economy playlist.